I've worked all my way up through the grits. This is a blue film 1200 grit belt. It's the last of the abrasives that we're going to use on the edge of the knife. And I'm trying to show you here the burr that I've developed. Alright, so we're up to 1200 grit. I'm going to try my best to show you this itty bitty tiny little burr. If you look right up here underneath my finger, you might be able to make out a tiny bit of a highlight on the edge. So what I'm going to do is try to push that up, and that's the burr. It's a really light, feathery little thing. And what's going on there is the actual physical structure of the steel is failing. And that's a good thing. So a burr, like on this vulcanized paper, comes along when your material has been cut so thin in an area that it starts to fall apart. So on a piece of paper like this, that means I have to sand these little gnarly bits off. But on a blade, what that means is, and there you can start to make out the burr a little bit better on the edge there. What's going on is I've got the steel so thin on the edge that the molecular structure is giving up. It's kind of like when you stretch something so thin and thin and thin, and then it'll just start to tear apart because there's nothing left to it. So the harder your blade is, the thinner you can get it. The more fragile it's going to be, but the thinner you can get it. That's why something like a scalpel or a straight razor, you see them going over the strop with it every time you use it, because the edge is really thin, it's going to tend to fold over. And a strop or a kitchen steel will bring that back. That's why when you see the chef guy like going on the metal stick, that's what's going on. It's not actually sharpening the blade, it's what we call honing it, which is the next step that we're going to do. We're going to hone the edge, which is going to fold that really micro thin layer this way, that way, this way, that way, until the burr is going to snap off. And then what you're left with is the absolute minimal amount of material on the edge according to your heat treatment of the steel. So you don't do a good job, you're not going to get as fine of an edge, it'll still cut, da-da-da-da-da. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that with retention and a bunch of things that is all stuff for a different video. But I'm going to load up my leather belt, and I'll show you that because that's really cool. And what we're going to do is polish this 1200 grit edge already to an infinitely small area. So I will load up my belt and we will get to the actual sharpening, honing part of this project. Alright folks, this is it. This is the very last grinder portion for this blade. What I have here is my leather honing belt. This is an actual piece of leather, just rawhide, and it's got a seam that's glued together. And very important note that my plate here has been scooched back. This at one time got caught on the lip here and it ripped apart and blah, blah, blah. I've glued it back together. It works very well. This is from Knife Dogs. They have really cool grinder stuff. Go check them out. This is, I think, the most important finishing belt in the shop. I've had one of these. It has stretched, and that's why I like to leave the flat plate on. It would make more sense to remove it so there's no hindering the belt as it goes along the wheels. But I feel like you got to put so much tension on this thing, and it is leather, so it's just going to stretch out, that I leave the plate on a little bit, so when I press down in here, you want it to like be soft and wrap around, and that'll actually help curl this burr off the edge of it. But if you got too much, then it's just not really doing its job. So we figured out that if you can get this set up at an angle, you get just enough play in the belt that when you push it in there, it works great. So the leather belt works off a compound. This is seasoned like a frying pan. I don't usually even put stuff on it anymore, but we will for today. And what this is going to do is we're going to run the belt. It's going to go really violent and loud, and it flips all over the place. It's not super safe, but it works really well. And it's a hell of a lot better than sitting here polishing those burr off with a million grit soapstone that costs an arm and a leg. So I'm gonna get on the belt. We'll have a flawless edge here in a minute, and I might even be able to stop this for a second and give you a really good close-up of the burr, because it's gonna chip off and really get accentuated when I start to use this belt. All right. Well, all my burr popped off already. It did too good of a job. Maybe next time. Basically, at this point, I'm running it at a little bit more aggressive of an angle because I do want it to wrap around the edge and give it a little bit of a convex shape. It just seems to help out everything and with retention and letting the actual final itty bit of the edge get finished. So what I'm looking for is the burr to absolutely vanish. You can see it'll kind of flip over, and it's like this highlight you can see waving around, and you just keep going back and forth until it's not there anymore. And almost there. This is coming out very smoothly. That leaves us with a mirror polished edge. Alright, let's clean it up and cut some stuff. Make sure.